There are certain days that arrive without making any noise, yet somehow they alter the direction of your inner world more than the events you once believed would change everything. Today, as the moon moves into Aquarius on the 4th day of June, one of those moments quietly unfolds. Nothing around you may appear different. The people in your life are still the same. Your responsibilities remain where they were yesterday. The familiar structure of your routine continues uninterrupted. Yet beneath all of that, beneath the surface level of what can be seen and measured, something has begun to shift. It is subtle enough that you could almost miss it, but powerful enough that once you recognize it, you will never look at this period of your life in quite the same way again. You may have already felt the first signs without realizing what they were. Perhaps it arrived as a thought that refused to leave your mind, even though it seemed disconnected from everything else. Perhaps it appeared as an unusual feeling of stillness, a silence that felt heavier than ordinary quiet, as though some unseen part of your awareness was standing at the edge of a realization and waiting for you to notice it. Before we continue, take a moment to acknowledge what you have been sensing lately. There is a reason messages like this often find people at exactly the moment they need them. Long before the conscious mind understands what is happening, another part of you begins detecting the movement. That deeper part recognizes changes before they become visible. It feels the tide turning before the shoreline reveals it. If these words feel strangely familiar, if something inside you reacts before logic can explain why, then there is a good chance you have already begun feeling this transition long before arriving here today. What makes this energy so important is that it is not focused on changing your external circumstances. It is not announcing dramatic events or sudden upheavals in the visible world. Instead, it is directing your attention inward. It is creating a recalibration within your own awareness, a quiet adjustment that begins at the deepest levels of perception. You may not fully understand it yet, but there is a growing recognition that this moment did not appear randomly. Somehow, through experiences you barely noticed, and lessons you did not fully understand at the time, you've been preparing for this stage of awareness. Looking back, you may realize there's been a subtle pressure building for quite some time, not an overwhelming force demanding immediate action, not a crisis that pushed you into drastic decisions. This pressure has been much quieter than that. It has lingered patiently in the background of your life, appearing in ways that were easy to dismiss individually, but impossible to ignore collectively. It emerges when conversations end and leave you feeling as though something important remained unsaid. It appears when familiar routines continue functioning perfectly, yet somehow no longer provide the sense of fulfillment they once did. It reveals itself during moments when everything seems fine on the surface, but an unexplained feeling tells you that something essential is missing. Many people mistake this sensation for confusion. They assume they are lost, uncertain, or simply overthinking. Yet, what is happening now runs much deeper than confusion. What you are experiencing is contrast becoming visible. The Aquarian current moving through this period does not arrive to reinforce what already exists. It does not come to soothe you back into old patterns or strengthen structures that have outlived their purpose. Instead, it illuminates the distance between your present reality and the direction your deeper self has been attempting to guide you toward all along. That realization can be uncomfortable because it rarely arrives with immediate solutions. Instead of answers, it introduces questions, questions that linger long after they first appear, questions that continue echoing through your awareness during quiet moments, questions you never expected to be asking yourself right now. You may find old memories returning unexpectedly. Certain decisions from the past may suddenly feel important again. Former versions of yourself may come back into focus, not because you wish to relive them, but because there is something within those experiences that now carries a meaning you could not recognize before. As this process unfolds, an interesting transformation begins. Small moments that once seemed unrelated start connecting to one another. At first it appears insignificant. A repeated emotional reaction, a familiar disappointment, a situation that keeps returning under different circumstances, a dynamic that somehow follows you through multiple chapters of life despite changes in environment, relationships, or goals. Initially, these repetitions appear random. They look like coincidences scattered throughout your story. Yet as more of them accumulate, your perspective begins to change. Gradually, you stop seeing isolated events and start recognizing a pattern. Then comes the moment that changes everything, the moment when you suddenly understand that what you believed was random has actually been communicating something important all along. The repetition was never meaningless. It was carrying a message attempting to reach your awareness through recurring experiences because direct understanding had not yet become possible. The Aquarian energy moving through your life right now is not creating these patterns. It is exposing them. More importantly, it is giving you enough distance from them that you can finally observe them without immediately becoming trapped inside them. This perspective creates a unique kind of clarity. And clarity, while liberating, can also feel deeply unsettling, because once something becomes visible, it cannot become invisible again. Once truth reveals itself, pretending not to know becomes far more exhausting than facing it directly. That is why a powerful question may be quietly forming within you right now. Not a question about why these experiences happened, not a question about who is responsible, instead, a question about what you intend to do with the awareness that is now emerging. This is where the true significance of this moment begins. There are periods in life that appear ordinary to everyone else but carry tremendous weight within the person experiencing them. Moments when time feels different, moments when your attention becomes sharper, your awareness more present, and your connection to yourself more difficult to ignore. This is one of those thresholds. It is not demanding immediate action. It is not urging reckless decisions or dramatic declarations. It is inviting something far more precise. It is asking for honesty. Not the kind of honesty that comes with self-criticism or judgment, but the kind that allows reality to be seen exactly as it is. As you stand within this energy, one question becomes increasingly difficult to avoid. What have you been unwilling to see clearly? This question is not an accusation. It is not an invitation to regret. It is an opportunity to stop resisting what your deeper awareness has been attempting to show you. Sometimes truth arrives gently. Other times it feels disruptive because it begins dismantling assumptions that once felt safe. Yet even that dismantling serves a purpose. It is not occurring to create loss. It is occurring to create alignment. It is removing distortions so that what remains is more authentic, more accurate, and more deeply connected to the person you are gradually becoming. And as this realization continues unfolding within you, another layer of understanding waits just beyond the horizon, preparing to reveal why this shift is only the beginning of something far more significant than it first appears. What if the uncertainty you have been feeling is not a sign that you are lost, but evidence that your perspective is beginning to change in a way that can no longer be reversed? Right now, whether you fully realize it or not, you are standing inside a rare psychological and spiritual turning point. You may not possess every answer you have been searching for. The entire picture may still be hidden beyond your immediate view. Yet something important is happening beneath the surface. The way you are looking at your life is no longer the same as it was even a short time ago. There is a noticeable difference in how you are processing experiences, relationships, and situations that once seemed straightforward. It may feel as though a quiet space has emerged between you and certain aspects of your life, a distance that did not exist before. At first, that distance can feel unsettling. Human beings naturally seek familiarity, even when familiarity no longer serves them. When something that once felt emotionally immediate suddenly becomes easier to observe, the mind often interprets it as separation or loss. But that is not what is happening here. What you are experiencing is the arrival of perspective. The emotional fog that once surrounded certain situations is beginning to thin. The intensity that previously colored every interaction, every memory, and every assumption is softening just enough to allow reality to reveal itself more honestly. You are not becoming detached from your life. You are becoming capable of seeing it without the distortions that emotion sometimes creates. And that subtle difference changes everything. Suddenly, dynamics that once pulled you into automatic reactions become visible from a new angle. You begin noticing patterns that previously operated beneath your awareness. You recognize conversations that leave you feeling drained. You see obligations that no longer feel meaningful. You become aware of expectations that you have been carrying simply because they became familiar over time. None of these things necessarily changed overnight. The people involved may be behaving exactly as they always have. The circumstances themselves may remain largely unchanged, yet your relationship to them is transforming because your awareness is evolving. What once felt completely normal may now feel restrictive. What once seemed unquestionable may now reveal cracks beneath the surface. What once felt secure may now appear incomplete. This is not because something has gone wrong. It is because something inside you has finally become unwilling to overlook what it can clearly perceive. One of the most profound aspects of this process is how quietly it unfolds. There is rarely a dramatic announcement. No external event arrives to declare that a breakthrough has occurred. No voice from outside confirms what is happening within you. Instead, the realization appears during ordinary moments, perhaps while driving somewhere familiar, perhaps while sitting alone in silence, perhaps in the middle of a routine day that appears completely unremarkable from the outside. Yet within that seemingly ordinary moment, a deeper understanding suddenly settles into place. You realize something that has likely been present for a very long time, something your intuition has been whispering repeatedly, something your deeper awareness recognized long before your conscious mind was prepared to acknowledge it. Maybe it concerns a choice you have continued postponing because the timing never felt right. Maybe it involves a relationship whose truth has been difficult to fully accept. Maybe it relates to a direction your life has been moving in, one that no longer resonates with the person you are becoming. Whatever form it takes, the power of the realization does not come from discovering something entirely new. The power comes from finally allowing yourself to see what has already been there. There is a tremendous difference between sensing a truth and consciously accepting it. Many people spend years feeling something internally while simultaneously avoiding direct acknowledgement of it, but eventually there comes a moment when avoidance becomes impossible. A moment when your inner knowing and your conscious awareness finally meet in the same place. When that meeting occurs, movement begins. Even before a single external action is taken, something starts shifting within you. And that internal movement creates its own kind of tension. It is a tension many people never anticipate, because clarity does not always bring immediate relief. Sometimes clarity creates a temporary discomfort. One part of you now understands something with remarkable certainty. Another part still feels attached to what is familiar, predictable, and known. This creates a pull between two realities. Not because you are confused, but because transformation always asks you to release something before you can fully embrace what comes next. Even when change is deeply aligned with your growth, it still involves letting go. It still requires moving beyond structures that once provided comfort. That process is rarely immediate, rarely effortless. Some days you may feel completely ready to move forward. You may feel energized by the possibilities unfolding ahead of you. Then suddenly another day arrives and uncertainty returns. Questions emerge, doubts surface. The temptation to remain exactly where you are begins whispering once again. Not because staying is right for you, but because it is familiar. This back and forth movement is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of transition. Real transformation does not happen in a straight line. It unfolds through layers, through emotional waves, through moments of confidence followed by moments of hesitation, through periods of certainty interrupted by periods of reflection. Yet beneath all of those fluctuations, something deeper continues developing. As this internal process progresses, another realization begins to emerge. You start sensing that you are approaching a point where maintaining the status quo requires more energy than embracing change. The weight of remaining the same gradually becomes heavier than the uncertainty of moving forward. This is another threshold, not one that forces your hand, not one that demands an immediate decision. Instead, it creates a situation where the existence of the decision can no longer be ignored. You feel it quietly growing within you. You notice it in the way your thoughts begin organizing themselves. You see it in the way certain possibilities no longer hold the same appeal they once did. You recognize it in the gradual narrowing of your focus, even if you have not spoken the decision aloud, even if you have not fully articulated it to yourself. Something inside is already moving toward alignment, and this alignment is not being created through pressure. It is not being driven by urgency or fear. It is emerging through understanding, through the recognition that a shift is approaching and that you are far closer to that shift than you have been at any point before now. As you remain within this space, the feeling of standing at a crossroads becomes increasingly unmistakable. The full landscape may not yet be visible. The future may still contain unanswered questions. Yet distractions begin losing their power. The noise starts fading into the background. What truly matters rises steadily toward the surface. You may notice the same thoughts returning again and again, not in a frantic or overwhelming way, but with a calm consistency, almost as if another part of your awareness is gently guiding your attention back to something important, back to something essential, back to something that deserves acknowledgement. This is how genuine turning points often strengthen, not through force, not through dramatic pressure, but through quiet persistence, through an inner gravity that repeatedly draws your awareness toward what is most aligned with your growth. And even when you attempt to look away, distract yourself, or postpone the moment a little longer, that deeper knowing continues, waiting patiently, growing stronger with each return, preparing you for the next stage of understanding that is already beginning to emerge. Have you noticed how certain realizations refuse to leave? No matter how many times you try to set them aside, you tell yourself you will think about them later. You distract yourself with responsibilities, routines, conversations, and daily obligations. Yet somehow they return. Quietly, patiently, not demanding your attention, not creating chaos, but remaining present in the background of your awareness. That persistence is not accidental. It is one of the clearest signs that something important has already begun moving within you. What makes this period so meaningful is not that it forces you into immediate action. In fact, the energy surrounding this moment does the opposite. It allows you space. It gives you room to observe. It respects your timing. Yet, despite that patience, it never completely fades away. The realization continues waiting for you, returning whenever there is enough silence for you to hear it again. This is why this threshold carries such significance. Its influence does not depend on whether you are ready to take the next step. Its presence alone starts transforming your perspective. Long before an external choice is made, an internal movement has already started. Long before circumstances change around you, your relationship to those circumstances begins changing from within. Gradually, you start recognizing that what is happening is larger than a single decision. It is larger than choosing one direction over another. At its deepest level, this experience is about acknowledging a transformation that has already been unfolding beneath the surface of your life for far longer than you may realize. The choice that eventually appears in front of you is simply the visible expression of something invisible that has been developing over time, piece by piece, insight by insight, experience by experience. A new alignment has been forming within your awareness, and now that alignment is becoming difficult to ignore. As this understanding grows stronger, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop viewing the situation through the old lens of right versus wrong. You stop searching for perfect certainty. You stop trying to calculate every possible outcome before allowing yourself to move. Instead, a different question starts emerging, a quieter question, a more honest one. You begin asking yourself what feels genuinely aligned and what no longer does. That shift in perspective changes everything, because when you operate from alignment rather than fear, the endless cycle of overanalysis begins losing its power. There are certain truths that cannot be fully explained through logic. Certain forms of knowing that arrive before language can organize them into clear explanations. You may not be able to defend them in a debate. You may not be able to explain them to everyone around you, yet somewhere deep inside you recognize their validity. This is the kind of knowing that is beginning to awaken now, not a force that pushes you forward against your will, but a gentle guidance that repeatedly points your awareness toward what is becoming increasingly true for you. There is an important difference between being pressured and being guided. Pressure creates resistance. Guidance creates recognition. And what is happening within you now feels much closer to recognition. Even if the future remains partially hidden, even if you cannot yet see the full outcome of the road ahead, there is a growing awareness that remaining exactly where you are may no longer feel as natural as it once did. Something within you is beginning to lean toward the future, not because it possesses absolute certainty, but because it possesses readiness. Readiness is often misunderstood. Many people believe they must eliminate all doubt before moving forward. They believe readiness means having every answer. But true readiness rarely looks like that. More often, it appears as a willingness to continue despite unanswered questions, a willingness to trust what you know while accepting what you do not yet know. As this readiness strengthens, another experience often emerges alongside it. Fear begins to surface, not because something is wrong, but because growth is approaching. This fear is not your enemy. It is not evidence that you should stop. It is simply the mind's natural response to entering unfamiliar territory. As your awareness expands, you may find yourself questioning what you see. You may wonder whether your perception can be trusted. You may ask yourself if you are truly prepared to act upon what has become visible. Thoughts arise, questions multiply. What if this change becomes larger than expected? What if the future feels less stable than the reality you currently know? What if the unknown contains challenges you cannot yet predict? These questions can feel intimidating, especially when they appear repeatedly. Yet their purpose is often misunderstood. They are not arriving to prevent your growth. They are revealing the edges of your current comfort zone. Fear frequently appears at the exact location where expansion begins. It shows up when the familiar starts loosening its grip and the new has not yet fully arrived. Standing in that in-between space can feel vulnerable. It can feel uncertain. Yet it also contains tremendous strength, because every meaningful transformation requires passing through a stage where the destination is not fully visible. As fear moves through your awareness, it may wear many different disguises. Sometimes it appears as hesitation. Sometimes it arrives as self-doubt. Sometimes it manifests as a sudden desire to retreat into routines that feel safe and predictable. You may notice your mind working overtime, constructing possible futures, imagining countless outcomes, trying desperately to regain control over what cannot yet be known. This reaction is deeply human. It is the mind's attempt to create stability during periods of transition. But if you watch these thoughts carefully, something interesting becomes apparent. Most of them are not actually connected to the present moment. They are connected to imagined futures. They are reactions to possibilities rather than realities. They are stories about what might happen rather than observations about what is happening now. Beneath all of this lies an even deeper layer of fear, one that many people overlook entirely. The challenge is not only about stepping into the unknown, it is also about releasing an identity that has become intertwined with your current circumstances. Even when an identity no longer reflects who you truly are, it remains familiar, it remains recognizable, it gives structure to your sense of self. Letting go of that identity can feel like stepping into open space before a new foundation has fully formed. That transitional territory often feels uncomfortable because it lacks the certainty of the past while still withholding the clarity of the future. Yet, hidden within that uncertainty is possibility. Hidden within that uncertainty is room for something new to emerge, something more aligned, something more authentic, something that could not fully develop while the old version of you remained in control. As you learn to stay present with these feelings rather than fighting them, another realization begins to unfold. Fear is not permanent. It moves. It changes. It rises and falls like waves crossing the surface of water. There are moments when it feels powerful and immediate. Then there are moments when it fades into the background entirely. And between those waves, something else becomes visible. Moments of remarkable clarity. Moments of calm certainty. Moments where a deeper truth feels stronger than any temporary doubt. These moments matter because they reveal something essential. Fear is only one voice within your experience. It is not the whole story. It never was. Even when uncertainty feels intense, another presence remains quietly active beneath it all. A deeper awareness, a steadier intelligence, a part of you that continues guiding your attention toward growth even when your thoughts become noisy. This deeper presence does not attempt to destroy fear. It does not argue with it. It simply exists beside it, offering a perspective rooted not in avoidance but in consciousness, not in reaction but in understanding. And as you continue moving through this process, something powerful begins awakening beneath all the questions, beneath the emotional fluctuations, beneath every moment of uncertainty. A steady force begins emerging, not dramatic, not explosive, not demanding recognition. Instead, it arrives with quiet consistency. It feels like an activation occurring deep within your awareness, a subtle shift that changes how you relate to your own experience. You begin noticing that situations affect you differently. Reactions that once happened automatically no longer occur with the same intensity. A small space begins appearing between events and your responses to them. That space may seem insignificant at first, yet it contains extraordinary power, because within that pause lives awareness, and where awareness exists, choice becomes possible. You may still be uncertain about the road ahead. You may still be discovering what comes next. Yet something important has already changed. You are no longer standing where you once stood. A transformation has already begun. Not because you suddenly possess every answer, but because you have become more conscious of your own direction, more aware of the patterns influencing your life, more connected to the deeper alignment that has been quietly guiding you all along. As this activation continues settling into your awareness, you may find your inner world becoming more spacious. Thoughts no longer feel so crowded. Reactions no longer feel so automatic. There is more room to observe before engaging, more room to witness before responding. And because of that growing space, situations that once controlled your emotional state may begin feeling fundamentally different, not because those situations have changed, but because you have. And that subtle transformation is preparing the ground for the next realization that is already beginning to take shape beyond the horizon of your awareness. What if the most important transformation taking place in your life right now is so quiet that most people would never notice it, yet powerful enough to alter the course of everything that follows? That is the nature of the shift unfolding within you at this moment. It does not arrive with dramatic announcements. It does not demand attention through chaos or disruption. Instead, it emerges through subtle changes in awareness, through small moments that seem insignificant when viewed individually, but become extraordinary when recognized as part of a larger pattern. This is the beginning of a different way of moving through your life, a way that is no longer governed primarily by automatic habits, emotional conditioning, or unconscious repetition. Instead, it is guided by awareness, and that distinction carries far more power than it may initially appear. Most people spend years operating from patterns they never consciously chose. Reactions become routines. Expectations become identities. Behaviors become automatic. Yet there comes a point when awareness begins interrupting those cycles. Not aggressively, not all at once, but gently, quietly, consistently. And that is exactly what is happening now. You may notice moments when your own responses surprise you. Situations that once would have triggered urgency suddenly evoke patience. Circumstances that previously generated confusion now produce unexpected clarity. Challenges that once pulled you into emotional turbulence seem to create space for observation instead. At first, these moments may appear small, easy to overlook, yet they're carrying evidence of something profound. They reveal that change is not waiting somewhere in the future. It is already occurring. It is already expressing itself through your thoughts, your emotions, your decisions, and the way you engage with the world around you. Every unexpected moment of patience, every instance of increased clarity, every choice that feels more aligned than reactive, these are not isolated experiences. They are signs of an internal evolution that is steadily gaining momentum beneath the surface. What makes this process particularly meaningful is that it does not require complete certainty. Many people delay their growth because they believe they must see the entire path before taking the next step. They wait for perfect understanding. They wait for guarantees. They wait for the absence of doubt. Yet true transformation rarely arrives that way. The trust beginning to form within you now is not based on having every answer. It is rooted in something much deeper. It is rooted in the growing recognition that you are capable of meeting whatever appears before you. There is a profound difference between knowing exactly what will happen and trusting your ability to navigate what happened. The first seeks control. The second develops wisdom. And what is emerging within you belongs to the second category. You may not be able to predict every turn ahead. You may not yet understand the full destination. Yet there is an increasing sense that you do not need to. Because what is strengthening inside you is not dependent upon certainty. It is being built through presence, through awareness, through a deeper relationship with yourself that becomes stronger each time you choose consciousness over automatic reaction, each time you remain attentive to what is happening within you, each time you observe rather than immediately respond, each time you allow awareness to guide your choices rather than fear. This is how lasting transformation stabilizes, not through sudden breakthroughs alone, but through consistent recognition, through repeatedly noticing what is changing within you, through honoring the quiet awakening that has already begun. And as this awakening becomes integrated into your daily experience, it gradually transforms from an occasional realization into a new way of being, a new foundation from which your life begins unfolding. As this activation settles more deeply into your awareness, another layer of transformation begins revealing itself. It feels almost as though your inner world is reorganizing according to a different rhythm, a different frequency. Not one that you consciously selected, yet one that feels strangely familiar, as if some deeper part of you recognizes it immediately. This adjustment does not occur overnight. It does not demand dramatic attention, yet its influence becomes visible in subtle ways. You begin noticing that certain thoughts no longer carry the same weight. Certain worries no longer generate the same emotional intensity. Certain situations no longer possess the same power over your state of mind. Something is changing beneath the surface, and while the external world may appear largely unchanged, your internal landscape is beginning to operate differently. This is the beginning of profound inner realignment, a stage where your energy starts flowing in a new direction before your outer circumstances have fully caught up. There is a growing sense that your awareness is no longer anchored to the same place it once occupied. The perspective from which you view your life is shifting. And although this new perspective may feel unfamiliar at times, it also carries an unmistakable quality of truth. You may discover that you are becoming less willing to settle for situations that feel misaligned with your deeper values, less interested in maintaining patterns simply because they are familiar, less motivated by obligations that no longer resonate with who you are becoming. At the same time, you may find yourself becoming increasingly sensitive to subtle signals arising from within. Intuitive nudges, quiet realizations, feelings that point toward authenticity rather than comfort. This is not a sudden reinvention of your life, it is something far more sustainable, a gradual movement into greater alignment, a process that unfolds through awareness rather than force, through observation rather than struggle, through the growing willingness to allow a deeper aspect of yourself to take the lead. As this alignment continues strengthening, clarity expands alongside it. Yet clarity does not reveal everything at once. It arrives in layers, one insight leading naturally to another, one realization creating space for the next, almost as though your awareness is being guided through a carefully timed unfolding, each piece arriving precisely when you are ready to integrate it. You may begin recognizing connections that previously remained hidden. Experiences from your past suddenly reveal new meaning. Situations occurring in the present begin fitting into a larger pattern. What once seemed disconnected starts forming a coherent picture. And the remarkable thing is that this understanding often arrives without effort. It is not forced through analysis. It emerges through recognition, through moments when something simply clicks into place, moments when an answer appears without struggle, moments when understanding arrives with a sense of completeness that logic alone cannot fully explain. This is the essence of revelation, not a dramatic event that overwhelms your senses, not a sudden explosion of information. Instead, it is a gradual unveiling of truth, a steady expansion of perception that allows your inner awareness to align with a broader understanding of your journey. These insights are not appearing to overwhelm you. They're appearing to support you, to provide context, to help you understand experiences that once seemed confusing, to illuminate aspects of your path that were previously hidden from view. And as these revelations settle into your awareness, they begin creating a foundation for a different way of living, one that is rooted not in reaction, but in consciousness, not in survival, but in intentionality, not in habit, but in alignment. As this deeper awareness continues unfolding, another important transformation begins taking place. The version of yourself that once felt stable starts evolving, not disappearing, not being erased, but expanding beyond the structures that once defined it. You may notice that certain roles no longer fit as comfortably as they once did, certain assumptions no longer feel unquestionably true, certain expectations no longer feel naturally connected to your sense of self. There is a growing sensation that you are outgrowing something. Even if you cannot yet describe exactly what it is, this experience can feel disorienting because identity is deeply connected to familiarity. Human beings often define themselves through what they know, through repeated behaviors, through established beliefs, through predictable patterns. And when those familiar structures begin changing, uncertainty naturally follows. Yet what is occurring here is not loss, it is expansion. You are not abandoning yourself, you are uncovering more of yourself. The layers that no longer serve your growth are gradually loosening. The assumptions that once limited your perspective are beginning to dissolve. The roles that no longer reflect your authentic nature are becoming easier to recognize. What remains beneath those layers is not someone new. It is someone more genuine, someone closer to who you have always been beneath conditioning, expectations, and outdated definitions. As this process continues, you may find yourself questioning things that once seemed obvious. Beliefs you previously accepted without hesitation may invite deeper examination. Perspectives that once felt fixed may begin evolving. This does not mean you are becoming lost, quite the opposite. It means you are seeing from a higher level of awareness than before. The questions emerging now are not signs of confusion. They are signs of awakening. Signs that your consciousness is expanding beyond previous limitations. And rather than resisting this transformation, there is wisdom in simply observing it, allowing it, remaining present with it. Because this shift in identity is not an interruption of your journey. It is a vital part of a much larger transformation that is still unfolding, a transformation whose full significance has not yet revealed itself, but whose presence is becoming impossible to ignore.